Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil. Currently home to 6 female Asian elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls. Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining us again this week for a new episode of Global Rumblings. Sorry for leaving you on a cliffhanger last week, but let's head on over to Brazil to say hi to Kat and Scott, and let's resolve that cliffhanger. Hi, Kat. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hey, Nadia. How are you?
Nadia.
I'm fine. I'm excited. We're not going to be talking about the weather. I don't want to talk about the weather in your end of the woods, in my neck of the woods. So tell me, how did a cat stop a near brawl at the circus while you were rescuing Ramba?
Well, listen, if nobody was going to step in to help Scott, I was going to, even if it was a losing battle, because her handler was actually a brute. He was
not
a big, aggressive man.
Yeah.
So I was going to lose that battle terribly, but
I don't think so. I think Kat could take him.
I was still willing to take that risk.
But I have to say, as much as it is a cliffhanger for everybody else, going through that episode and thinking about it afterwards, I really wanted to drink because there is so much that goes on that we can't even cover, in a 20-minute or a 2-hour episode on Ramba. I mean, even this first section, if you go into all those little nuances and details and the looks from the audience and looks from the circus guys, all the things they were trying to manipulate, and
a bunch of them were hanging out on the top of the big cat cages across the way and doing things. It was just, the whole scenario was, I mean, whatever, it's the last chance to get her out, so you try to ignore all of it. But 2 of the guys that were with the group trying to get her moved, they were all sorts of not happy about any of it, and about us not really being protected, the general aggression. That was before anything even happened. The guy who worked with the trucking company, was he an ex-Marine? Mm-hmm. He was this big guy, and even he wasn't really comfortable with what seemed like it might happen before it even happened. So
in part because there's a general lack of confidence in the police there, because the police don't often step in when they're supposed to. And
in part because circus is generally related to
mafia.
Yeah. So
I had to think about that if you said that she was confiscated due to brutality and abuse and, yes, not being looked after properly. When you said that they had all these other animals like bears and tigers and everything else, I was just wondering, crumbs, if Ramba was treated that badly, I just don't want to go down that road thinking about how the other animals were treated as well.
Well, many times the elephants are the bigger profile, so they get the highlight, but that doesn't mean there's not an equal amount of negligence and abuse everywhere else. It's just often easier to profile it on elephants.
Yeah, and it may be a little pathetic on our part, but you really do try to compartmentalize it a little bit when you go into these places. It's no different than when we go into certain zoos. I mean, we've gone into zoos where it's heartbreaking walking through the zoo to get to the elephant we're supposed to be looking at or moving or assessing, because some of these enclosures are terrible. And I mean, it's archaic designs, and I mean, it's just terrible, but you can't, you'll drown in it. And it was the same thing with Ramba. I mean, I refuse to go and anywhere near the big cats or any of the other animals, because then you
lose yourself in it also.
Yeah. Pandora's box, huh? So when you said there was lots of aggression in the air, lots of very, very negative vibes, did these, I was wondering, transfer onto Ramba? Because she was feeling everybody's tension, or I presume she was feeling everybody's tension, because, they do pick up on that. Or so how did it all resolve?
Ramba was a rock star through all of it. She's always a rock star, but there's an element for me, I think, that she may have been amused that there was somebody there trying to speak up for her, and
knowing her personality later on, she was probably like, ooh, stupid humans. Yeah. Let's see what happens.
But they tolerate our humanity and the stupidity of humanity in so many ways, and I think it's just another day of stress for her, another day of, and all things considered, none of it was towards her, of course, so, for her, that may have been a good day, because a lot of times when people are frustrated, they take it out on her.
I mean, she's used to being surrounded by a bunch of people. When she was taken on the circus, even when she wasn't performing, they would keep her on a pen right on the street, and people would be touching her and reaching out to her, and everybody's yelling at her, and it's constantly loud. So, I mean, it's not like that scenario was
at all.
Yeah, or it's just, for a zoo elephant, I think that would have been like utter mayhem, and how they would have handled it, I don't know. But for her, unfortunately, I think to some degree she was used to most of what was going on around her.
Okay. Just one thing. I can't hear the bird. I can hear like a loud screeching and ringing sometimes. Is that because you're a little bit further away from the microphone, like a feedback? Or
no?
I heard that in the other recording as well.
I think it's going to be the cricket things that we have. We have like these cricket cicada things that are making a bunch of noise now because it's getting.
Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, they often say they screech more before the rain comes, and there is a forecast for rain tomorrow. Hopefully, we had a few little drops of rain here and there, so. Hopefully. I want to add that, thinking back in the story, and people will probably often say, isn't there a better way? Couldn't you have done something differently? Couldn't there have been more preparation? Couldn't you have whatever it may have been?
Oh my God, we would have loved to have been able to have more preparation. That would have been nice. But
we didn't have that option.
No.
And we didn't have, and a lot of times in these type of confiscations, you don't have those luxuries. I've been on confiscations in the United States also, where you go in and you say, okay, we're going to do this and hope for the best. It can go wrong, it can go well. You just never really know, because you don't have the scenarios that you have in some of these zoos where you can do training and conditioning. You're just going in and doing the best you can to get her out of a horrible situation.
Sure.
And it's her last chance.
How old was she at this time?
Yeah,
probably around 54.
Oh. Yeah, I admit that all those dates go away. All those ages, I don't retain them. All the years blend together, our own and theirs. So here we are waiting for the judge to make a determination, for the lawyer and the prosecutor to go back to the judge and find out what's going to happen next.
Essentially, everybody went back to their corners. Everybody got shunned away, back to their own side, and Ramba's trainer grabbed her by her sulcus, and actually the owner of the circus tried to get her to go back first, and she wouldn't go, and you could tell by looking at her she was getting pissed, most likely because this guy isn't the one who generally handles her. And elephants aren't stupid. They know who to be afraid of, they know who to not be afraid of. And for as much as she would do what she was told to, she's still an elephant, and now has this guy grabbing her face that doesn't usually most likely work with her. And she was getting mad, and her actual trainer ended up having to come over and grab her and put her back in her little square.
But even with that, he gave her a look. She gave him a look a couple of times. She was enjoying that freedom and knowing
it wasn't that far. She was probably only maybe 15 yards away from her little paddock, but it was still, it's just more than it's different. It has a different feel, it has a different everything. And she was like, no, this is pretty good.
But in that scenario also, she knows that they're not going to be as brutal as they would normally be if there weren't guards around. If they didn't have military, if they didn't have anybody around, they would be much more brutal with her. She knows. They know when they can get away with being a little bit rebellious.
Yeah.
So while she's being rebellious and while we're all waiting, we may have had lunch that day. I don't remember. But it was a long
we didn't
wait.
have lunch. We went and we hid in the shade because it was so hot and we were so dirty by that point.
So we are waiting and waiting and waiting. And what we hear back is that the colonel is coming with reinforcements and the judge has ordered that you will be allowed to proceed.
A colonel? That sounds like the
It was
army.
the colonel of the police force.
Oh, I see.
So they become a
But
reinforcement.
essentially, it's military police.
Mhm.
That's not normal police.
So we wait for them to show up, and it was late afternoon.
Yeah, because they told us nobody do anything until he shows up. So literally everybody's just sitting on opposite sides of this giant yard, kind of staring each other down. It was so stupid. It was so stupid.
So we're waiting and waiting, waiting. They show up late afternoon, and the colonel comes to talk to us, and immediately the the circus owner starts speaking to the colonel and saying, look, it says in the protocol, it's not supposed to use change. They started using change, blah, 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 blah. And the colonel put his hand in the face of the circus owner and said, I know the protocol. He said, Scott is the one that wrote the protocol. You're the one that did not abide from the protocol. And Scott, you are free to do what you guys need to do. You can move Ramba. You have until the end of the day today.
Oh, wow.
So we went until having 4 or 5 more days that we could do a little bit back and forth. And at that point, prior to that, we were thinking, okay, let's regroup. We'll come back tomorrow. We'll come up as a pen. He said, you have until the end of the day today, or she stays at the circus.
But he didn't show up alone.
Oh my gosh.
He showed up with him. He showed up with one of the lawyers, actually, that worked for Ecopolis, and about 30 armed guards with machine guns. And they essentially surrounded the whole yard, splitting between us and the circus people. And he stood, maybe 15 yards behind us with the lawyer, just staring at us the whole time. And that was how he had to try to move her.
And there were a couple of times when the circus guys started going to different locations at different times, going up in different places and going in different locations once we got started, and they were still trying to intimidate Ramba. I would just look at the colonel, or Kat would look at the colonel and point to the guy, and they would immediately go get them away. I mean, they were much more responsive. They were much more protective. And there definitely was not going to be a fight at that point.
No, somebody was going to get
lost
shot.
3 days, huh?
Yeah. The question is Ramba going to go in the trailer? Because we have till today. And fortunately, you guys all know the end of the story. So, she does go in the trailer. However,
oh, wow. Thank goodness.
The afternoon continued on. It went into evening, and Ramba, we did have a chain on her leg going through the trailer. So she couldn't really walk away at that point. We were just letting her go close to the trailer, let it check it out. She'd go partway in with the front feet, and then she'd back out. She'd go in the front feet and back out. And then it went on for a couple of hours that way. She was chill. She was eating. She wasn't hyper stressed or anything like that.
No, the only beings that were stressed were us, because, I mean, you would literally at one point, Scott turned around to look at the colonel and he tapped his watch. It's like, we know what we know. We have like 2 hours to convince this elephant somehow to go into the container, that she doesn't really seem interested in going in at all.
And at that point, it was getting dark. The sun is starting to go down a little bit, starting to get into, it's dusk now, and that's when he tapped his watch and looked at me. It's like, I know. And at one point they were complaining because she was thirsty. I was already on my way over to say, I'm going to give her a drink and let her settle for a little bit. I said, we know these behaviors. It's not just, the circus is trying to show they know her best, but we had already talked about giving her a drink and looking after her that way. We can tell, we can read elephants. And so he tapped his watch, and I'm like, Ramba, please, 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 please. Cat saying, please, 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 please.
I don't think I've ever begged an elephant so much in my entire career with elephants, honestly. It was a little pathetic.
And it's right around that time as, it's getting almost too dark to really see much what's going on. We're getting to the point of, what are we going to be able to do? Are we going to have to give up? And Ramba turned around, backed herself into the container. We pulled the chain taut as quickly as possible and immediately started closing the doors.
Yeah, it was like all at once. She's like, okay, I'll give it to you. And she just walked right in. And it was one of those moments where like you took half a second to look at each other and be like, really? And then, of course, because you wanted to make sure she stayed in there, it was like, pull the chain. But
do you know why the judge had then decided to say either today until midnight or that's it? Why he decided to not give you the 3 extra days as originally? Because I mean, the military police could have come every day to do, to guard off the yard and give you all time to do your thing. But
we have no idea, because that was all part of the conversation between the lawyers, the prosecutor, and the judge.
which of course we didn't have the ability to even be part of because of the limited time we had with her. But I'm sure it was just, they didn't want this conflict. They didn't want to have to be invested in this every day for the next however many days. I'm sure they probably thought that if we all went home and came back the next day, that it would be worse, which it probably would have been. So I think I don't want to say they didn't care enough about her, but I'm sure there was a view of, it's just an elephant. Let's not end up with dead people.
And this is the third time we told you can move her and you still have no success. You're not going to be able to move her. No one's qualified. Who knows what conversations existed there.
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Oh, Ramba, but Ramba saved the day. Well, she saved her day.
Saved the day.
Amazing.
Oh my God.
And how long did the journey then take from Chile to Chile? I mean, from Chile to Chile, I don't know how far the park safari was where she was then.
Yeah, it wasn't that far, Nadia, but it was a little bit of a challenge. We had to first get the door closed because of the way the door is designed on that. And we are standing up top of the wall where we have an elephant that we don't really know, basically at her head. She was so gracious. She was so calm.
I mean, honestly, we were just so lucky she is who she was, because I mean, there are 90% of other elephants you never could have, it wouldn't have gone this way.
No. And if it was a different elephant, we would have had to do things vastly different but Ramba was showing us what she was showing us.
Sure.
We did some things that we wouldn't normally do. But she was just a rock star through it. So once we started once the chain was tight, started closing the door, we had to use a sledgehammer to get part of the door closed because it's an old shipping container. It's not new. And we had no time. We had no ability to make any modifications to make things work better.
We had to get the container on the truck.
The container was on a trailer. The container was already on the trailer, but the trailer dropped away from the truck. And then you had to reconnect the truck to the trailer. And then there was all loose gravel and sand, and it started getting stuck.
That was a mess.
And then we had to disconnect it again, reposition it again, hook it up again. And then we were finally able to leave.
Yes.
We have no idea what hour of the day, to be honest with you.
It was late.
It was dark. And it was about an hour and a half trip by car. And I think it was probably about 2.5 to 3 hours, if I recall.
We had a police escort because, again, they didn't trust that the circus people were going to just let us go without trying to do something. So
we made the trip there, and they get into the park safari because of the trailer that was used, because, again, we had no choice. And we had already been to Park Safari one time, and they had told us there was another way around. And then when we get there, they said, no, the other way is not going to work. We'll have to go over this primary entrance. And when we go over the primary entrance, the trailer was very, very low. In order to go up and over that, they had a little bit of momentum behind them. And the trailer bottomed out on the little bump and disconnected from the truck.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah. And this was, at this point, it's like 11.
She didn't roll away or anything. She just went straight down into the ground. And of course, Scott goes running over and jumps up on the front of the container to look over the top to see if she's okay. And she's eating. It's like, all right, clearly you don't care. The rest of us just had a heart attack, but fine, okay.
We have often said that elephant transport is not the elephant side of the hard part. The elephants are always the easy part. And aside from a little bit of the chaos of getting her into the transport container, and because of the scenario that was there, she was a rock star. We've said it before and say it again. She was really, really, really good.
Sidebar, this is not how normal rescues go. There's lots of planning. There's lots of flexibility. This was not a normal elephant rescue at all. So if people are listening to this and are like, this is what happens every time, no, thank goodness this is not what happens.
Yeah, this is definitely an extreme elephant confiscation from a mafia connected circus who have been embroiled in this battle for far too many years. It was a tough scenario. So because the trailer and everything was set up differently than we had initially planned on, when we get to her corral, the only option that we really had was to drive all the way into her space We couldn't unload her into a barn. We didn't have any of those options. We didn't have a crane available because of how, the timing on all of this.
You couldn't back up and open the doors. You had to just have everything in there with her.
So the truck drives into her space. We disconnect the trailer from the truck so that the trailer's, kind of on the ground now. The truck pulls forward into as far as it can before going into the creek. So it's not directly in her line of sight, because I don't want her to go play with this fancy truck. We don't want her to go play with a fancy truck.
They like to examine things, and because they are big, sometimes when they do that, things break.
So we're trying to help everyone understand everyone's exhausted. Everyone's emotional. My God, she's at a circus. Can you believe this happened? Can you believe how this day went?
It had to be like 2 or 3 in the morning by then.
And none of them were actually there with us at the circus except for 2 people. So they're all so emotional. Like, oh my God, can you imagine this day? And we're like, yes, believe it or not, we can imagine how the day was. We know firsthand how crazy it was. So we go there, we move everybody out of the way. There's people wanting to document her first steps into the space and trying to get everyone to respect her space, everyone out of the yard, just the trucks in her space. We go ahead and put out a line of fruit so that away from the truck, so that she comes out and eats the fruit and moves away from the truck, going towards a little pond. It's dark. There's no real lights. I think there may have been 1 or 2 lights on the barn, but it's pretty dark out there, middle of nowhere. It's not an illuminated zoo. It's pretty much middle of nowhere, little roadside zoo. So we open up the trailer and she looks out and she walks right past the bananas and she walks right past the corn and she walks right past the melon and she starts picking a little bit of grass. She starts throwing a little bit of dirt.
Aww.
She starts eating a little more grass. And then she starts throwing a little bit more dirt. And then she grazes and grazes and grazes and just act like, cool. This is nice.
Oh,
yeah, she was great. She was easy again, thankfully, but made herself right at home right away.
Yeah. She went over, splashed on the edge of the pond,
and made everybody leave. And then a little bit after everybody left, we were staying in these little cabanas that are on. It was Ramba's enclosure was next to a hoofstock enclosure that they would do drive-through safaris in. And then there were these 4 little like tiki hut kind of cabanas, and we stayed in the one closest to the elephant enclosure. And then on the other side of that was the tiger and lion enclosure, that they also did a drive-through safari. But we were in the cabana next to her enclosure, and she went to the back next to the cabanas and laid down and went to sleep.
Yeah, it was just a couple hours later. She was already sleeping.
Yeah, we could see her off of our porch. She was right there. So.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. And how big was this? How big was her enclosure?
It's about 2 acres.
Okay.
Yeah, nice grass.
And obviously lots of grass. I was going to say lots of grass because she obviously loved to graze.
Lots of grass, willows around the perimeter.
Yeah, she had a nice she had a pond with an island in the middle. And the island had these 2 beautiful willows on it. May they rest in peace. But, I mean, they were the only trees she had. I'm not sure how long they thought that they were going to live, but they lived for a little while. She loved them.
We have some beautiful photos of when she was first there.
Yeah. But yeah, there was they did an irrigation system, so there was fresh water running through and it would feed into the pond. And yeah, it was honestly nicer than many U.S. zoo enclosures for sure.
Absolutely.
And definitely nicer than what she came from. So the space was nice for her.
Are the nights in Chile equal to the space where you are now in Brazil? So are they very warm, or did she have to go in at night?
I think what we'll do, let's get into a little bit of that challenge next episode. I don't want to leave people hanging too much on that, but that's a whole other issue of what we had to do. So there's this relief that comes with her being at the circus. I mean, out of the circus, finally. She's finally free from the circus chaos, finally free from abuse. She's at this temporary enclosure, possibly going to be there for about 6 months, while she was still planning on going to the sanctuary in Tennessee. And we had a lot to do there. We had to try to train the staff. We had to try to get things set up, finding food sources. There's a lot that needed to take place over the next couple of weeks.
But to bring in something that Scott brought up earlier, otherwise it's not going to make sense that you brought it up and it never existed again. It was a long day, to say the least. We hadn't eaten. We didn't have any of our stuff. We just had the clothes on our back. And the owner of the safari park, who is a well-off man, asked us to come to his house and have pseudo dinner. I mean, just to make sure we ate, which was
about 3 a.m.
Very nice. But again, it's 3 a.m. We're exhausted. We are so dirty because we're covered with chain grease. We're covered with elephant poop from cleaning up and everything else. I mean, we're a mess.
We're disgusting right now.
I mean, I think it's almost the dirtiest I've been as how dirty we were. And that's saying a lot.
And let's go back to it. And the plan was for us to be there only for that first day to start the conditioning of her into the transport container. The plan was not to move.
No.
We're supposed to have a few more days to do this. So we didn't bring extra change of clothes. We didn't bring extra dinner and snacks and anything with us.
No. So he invites us over to his house. And of course we have to say yes because we have manners. But we don't have any other clothes. I think they left 2 t-shirts for us. But I mean, our pants are what's actually filthy. So we take a quick shower and we put on clean t-shirts, but we still have our dirty, disgusting pants. We go to his house, like the entire interior is white. I mean, it is like this log
designer home.
Totally. It's this log cabin with all this exposed wood that's beautifully done and manicured, but it's all white. And his wife is there who is like all made up and looking perfect and beautiful. And we walk in and we're like, oh my God, we can't even sit in this man's house right now. And she was so gracious and welcoming. And she's like, no, it's okay. It's okay. And it was just not okay. But we did sit and we had dinner and we went back to our house afterwards. And that's when Ramba was sleeping and we went to sleep. But again, we didn't have any clothes. So the next morning, we had to put on those same disgusting clothes to go to the hotel to get the rest of our stuff.
So we drive back an hour and a half to Sao Paulo. Actually, after taking care of Ramba in the morning.
Sao Paulo is Santiago.
Santiago, sorry. We take care of Ramba in the morning. She's all set. She's really, really chill. I mean, she just looks really content right now. And first time having any level of freedom like that.
Sure.
I mean, it's a small amount of freedom, but she looked really good.
And I mean, we say it time and time again, grass is such a big thing to elephants. You know, everybody thinks it's like this little, oh yes, it's nice they get to graze. You have no idea what it seems to mean to an elephant to be able to pick grass and feed themselves. It's emotionally soothing. There is a rhythm to it. It is this whole process. It's not just eating grass. And it seems to have such a significant impact, just the grass alone. So she was all zen that first morning and super happy. So we were like, okay, you're good. We're going to go get our stuff.
We arrived back at the Ritz. And as we were walking up the door, I'm sure, even though we had showered, you can still smell us from a long distance away. And
I'm sure.
The concierge opens the door, they opened the door, the concierge is there to welcome us. And he said, he had heard that we moved he even stepped back from us. We're on our way to the elevator and the people waiting on the elevator stepped out of our way and let us go in the elevator all on our own.
It was so sad. I mean, we're laughing, of course, once the elevator doors closed. We had to laugh because we were disgusting. I mean, and we're okay with being gross, but it's this top end 5-star hotel and we were just so nasty.
We were inappropriately there. We are not in the right place for our appearance on that day.
But we did take a shower while we were up there and we did put on clean clothes and then Scott got to do some interviews where they had him doing all sorts of interesting poses for the photos, which I thought was hysterical. It's so weird, some of the things that happen in other countries, but
and my dad still has the article that has Guru Gringo saves elephants.
they had him doing the thinker pose. Like literally, they had him do that pose so they could. It was just so bizarre. It's so funny.
You must have been so exhausted, Scott, that you sort of went along with that. But yeah, hey, what a celebration. I can imagine that the actual sort of what had happened probably took a few days to sink in after it was such a exciting, well, not exciting, such a adventurous and nearly traumatic rescue of Ramba. It probably did take a few days to actually finally settle down to understand that, yes, she is finally free from the circus.
And it's kind of similar to when elephants come here. It's like you don't actually get that moment to enjoy or process until like sometimes weeks later, because with her, there was still so much to do. There was so much to figure out. We had to see, you know, how she was going to respond to a bunch of things and see both emotionally and physically how she was. And we were going to have to train people who had never worked with an elephant, you know, on how to take care of her and
start her protective contact training,
figure out what food we could get. I mean, I know it sounds stupid, but people always think, oh, you know, don't you have this and that for your elephants? It's like, no, that doesn't exist here. And it's the same thing in Chile. It's different what they have there than what they have here. And I mean, there's so much to get sorted. And the fence, honestly, was a piece of garbage. And 95% of elephants we've worked with would never have stayed behind it. So we had to see that it was actually going to be safe and she was going to be respectful of the fencing. I mean, there was just so much going on and media everywhere for I don't even know how many days that you don't really, nothing settles until weeks in with that.
Yeah, you don't have time. You don't have time to go back and think about what that day was like. And until we do podcasts 15 years ago. Truly, it takes a while, as Kat just said. It takes a while for it to really sink in. And sometimes not even fully until you start trying to verbalize those nuances. Remember that.
There's our word. We could have, our drinking game word, nuances. We've been very slack on that.
We can start drinking now. Still drinking the anxiety thinking about that relocation. It was a hard one.
Talking of drinking, I haven't had any dinner yet. Not that I drink for dinner. That sounds really strange now. I haven't had any dinner yet because I ate so late at lunchtime that I wasn't very hungry, and time is running out. So, what are you guys doing before we get cut off? What are you doing for the rest of the day?
Elephant care. We are down an extra person today. She found a stray cat, and actually found her underneath her car at the grocery store in town. And she went back to check on it at lunch, and it's not doing really well. So she's going to stay back and take care of it this afternoon. So we're down to keep her. So we need to go in and see what's left, see what needs to be done in order to get ready for taking care of the elephants at the end of the day.
Okay. Yes, they do like their dinner in a timely manner.
Mostly.
Maya and Gichi will come and find you if you are late.
Oh, okay. So I'll say we, but you are showered, you are clean, you've left the Ritz in an adequate manner, and you're back at the temporary enclosure where Ramba is staying. So I'll say goodbye for this week, and we'll pick up then in our next recording. And yes, I'll say goodbye and thank you for your time.
Thank you again, Nadia. It's always a pleasure.
Bye, Nadia.
Bye. So that wraps up this week's episode. We revealed and brought the cliffhanger to a close. Ramba is safe, the sanctuary's fourth elephant. So join us in 2 weeks' time. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a friendly review of our podcast. Share it with your friends and family. And until next time, take care. Bye.